You're listening to the A Bit From Within podcast with Felicia Marty. The best thing that you can do is learn how to trust your decision making by accepting whatever you choose. If there's one thing that regret can really teach you, it's what you would do differently in the future. And that is probably the biggest thing that we can really allow ourselves to let it influence us and how we want to move through the world and through our lives and through our decision making. Hi there, everyone, and thank you so much for tuning in to a new episode of the A Bit From Within podcast. I'm Felicia, and I am so excited to be finally sitting down and recording this. I feel like the last week has gone by so fast since the last time I was here. And I feel like it's been a wonderful week, but it has also been really busy. So this weekend was the first wedding that I photographed this year, and it has been a really long time coming. I know I mentioned a couple weeks ago how I did video for Dave for the first wedding of our official season of Felicia Marty Photo and Video, but to actually have my first wedding, to feel like I'm back in the swing of things, it feels really good. And there's been a lot of self-doubt kind of building up for me this past year. And it felt like a really beautiful opportunity to confront some of that self-doubt and really reintegrate myself into my style and into my work. I don't know if everybody feels this way in their own field. But when you're a photographer, I used to always joke, and I'm sure I've made this joke on the podcast before. I'm like, yeah, I'm a photographer and I'm a yoga teacher. Like, could I be any more typical? And it is true that I've picked a profession where there are a lot of other people who are also doing this profession. And with it being, photography is kind of a mixture of running a business and being a business owner and everything that goes along with that. But it is also a very artistic and creative process. And that makes it really hard because it's somewhat subjective. Now, of course, there are things that I think are better ways to do things. There are a lot of reasons why I do things a certain way. But I also think that there are so many people. I mean, if you ever get into photography, there are millions of people out there who have all of these courses on how to shoot and what to do and how to pose people and how to capture this and that. And some of it is really helpful information. Sometimes you just have never thought about something a certain way. And so just hearing somebody else talk about it is really, really helpful. But some of that stuff can also be this white noise. And it can actually cause you to doubt yourself and feel like there is a way you should be doing things or a way you shouldn't be doing things. One of the things that Dave and I talk about all the time is I guess not really but how does the work that I do fit in with the most popular mainstream trends that are happening on Instagram? And my stuff does not fit in with those kind of things. I do not use a set of filters. I don't turn things kind of more contrasty, more dark and moody. I like to keep things very timeless. That is the style that I go for. At least that's how I describe my style, is I want skin tones to look like real skin tones. I want it to be able to, if it was photographed in the spring, I want to be able to see the green in the budding leaves. I want things to be exactly how you remembered them in real life. And so that's kind of what I've always allowed to dictate my style. And when you don't fit into what's popular or what's mainstream, then it can get really easy to start to doubt yourself and to start to feel, or maybe just question yourself, like, am I doing the right thing? Am I fitting in? Is my work good enough? I think some of that is also just anxiety that comes from being kind of an anxious person who wants to excel and wants to do her best and all of that as well. But anyway, all I'm trying to say is that I had a lot of feelings going into this wedding, and I had a lot of goals for this wedding of things I wanted to prove to myself and things I wanted to capture and things I wanted to feel good about that I haven't felt great about in a while. You have to remember, it's been the longest that I've ever not shot a wedding. It's been over 6 months. And the other thing that I keep coming back to that I would be dishonest if I didn't say here is that last year was really hard. And it continues to reveal itself even more to me of how hard last year was and how much it really impacted me. It kind of reminds me of when I was in theater. So my degree is in theater. I think some of you, I've mentioned it before, but a lot of people don't know that about me. My degree is in theater, in directing, and in production development. And when we were in college, there was this, they call it a black box. So it's basically like this giant black box, like a room that is painted totally black, has super high ceilings, and it can be configured into anything you want or need it to be. So for a lot of the classes, there was just, some like stands put up, and we'd just sit there, and it was like a lecture space. There was acting classes that were in that space. And then for a lot of the like senior seminar projects, they'd actually turn it into like a theater, and that's where we would do all of our productions. And I remember, I can't think of the exact example. You'll have to forgive me. It was a long time ago after all. But I remember feeling like there was a time as I was getting my degree where I realized I'm not just learning how to do theater well. I'm at a state university where there's not anything you could want whenever you want it. Like basically what you're learning how to do is a lot with a little. And it was this light bulb moment for me where I was like, I'm actually really good at that. And I prided myself on this for a long time, is like how much you could turn and nothing, like no real stuff into something that was still a meaningful story and a beautifully told story and something that was well executed. And there's a lot that you can do with a little. But what I've also kind of learned over the years that I've taken that lesson with me, and it is an invaluable lesson, is there's also something to that can be kind of traumatic. And I probably don't have all of the right words or degrees to be able to talk about trauma by any means, but what I can say is that sometimes when you're in survival mode, you're also doing that same thing. You're trying to make a lot happen with a little. And I think that happened a lot with weddings last year specifically, is that there was so much stress. There was so little that anyone planning a wedding, both as the couple, deciding to actually get married, as well as the venue not knowing if they were going to be shut down or have to change the amount of guests that could be there, or how they were going to enforce a mask rule and all of those kind of things. That I think a lot happened last year that was like, we have to be able to do a lot with a little. And it felt like that with the photography too. And I feel so awkward talking about this, to be honest, because I don't ever want to make it seem like in order to photograph a beautiful wedding that you have to have a lot of stuff or spend a lot of money or anything like that. It has never been about that for me. Like, ultimately, at the end of the day, all that I care about is capturing two people's love story. And everything else is just like fun. The more details, the more events, the more excitement, the more that was put into it, the more, right? Like and it's not even that it ends up being more fun to photograph or more beautiful to photograph. It just means that there is more to show afterwards. And when you're a photographer, like a big part of your work is showcasing what you've taken pictures of. And if all I ever had to do was post pictures of people, gosh, I would be thrilled with that. And I would also feel like I have so much to work with. But right now to actually curate something that is interesting and that people who don't know the people you photographed want to see. It's a lot more about the details and the flowers and the colors and the insight. And I'm specifically talking about like curating like an Instagram gallery or a blog or my website, those kind of things. And that is where it has really hit me just how hard last year was, because I do think I photographed 30 amazing couples who all officially tied the knot, and that's so worth celebrating. And there is plenty of amazing stuff in there. But compared to what I've had in years past, with the kind of excitement and the kind of details and the kind of progression in my work, I did not have that last year. It definitely felt like almost in some ways of like going back to the beginning. And I know that it wasn't. I know that I still took all my skills with me, and the team captured some of the most beautiful days, but it definitely felt like working with a crisis, and it definitely felt in some ways like trying to do a lot with a little. And what I'm trying to recognize now as we go into this season is that it is okay for that to have just been what it was. It's neither good nor bad. It is part of our chapter. It is part of our story. And it was something that I learned from. And it's okay for me to even feel a little, I don't know the right word. It's not let down. It's not frustrated. But I guess that it did fill me with that self-doubt. Like it made me feel like, am I going to be able to get back to what it used to be? And I really felt like this weekend, not only did I want to show up and take amazing photos and kind of feel like I used to feel, but I also wanted to show up differently myself. I wanted to have more confidence in myself. I wanted to have better leadership. I wanted to feel more comfortable with decision making. And it's so funny that I'm actually talking about this, because this all connects to my main topic for later. You'll laugh when you hear me introduce that. But there are a lot of decisions that go into being a wedding photographer. You know, where the backdrop's going to be for the wedding party, the bride and groom. You know, what time are you going to shoot till? Are you going to go to that next spot and do 10 more minutes with them? Or are you going to take them back now so they can prepare for their wedding ceremony? And this weekend we had a forecast that was filled with rain. And so trying to navigate that was a little crazy. You know, when we first got out of the car to head into the hotel to do the getting ready, you know, we had our umbrellas ready. We're out there and the raindrops were coming down. But then by the time we did the first look, the rain was fine and it was gone. And then again, we were pretty good until right leading up to the ceremony, and then the raindrops started falling. And on a wedding day, that really is the worst time to feel like it's about to rain and you have to make a decision. Is like, is it going to come through and like just dump on everyone? Are you risking getting all of your guests soaked? Or is it going to be one of those Colorado rainstorms where it really just is not the most comfortable thing, but it's not hurting anybody. It's not ruining any equipment. It's not going to, run any makeup, that kind of stuff. It's not going to change any hair. And should we just go for it so that you can actually have the wedding that you dreamed of outside? And I would say 98% of the time, at least in my experience, you can usually get away with it. You kind of just chance it and roll with it. And maybe some people have umbrellas and that really helps. But we had to deal with that like right before the ceremony this weekend. And I was grateful that they decided to stay outside. I think it was so well worth it, but it definitely caused a little bit of drama right beforehand. It's totally okay. But yes, just I wanted to show up and feel confident in myself and relaxed, because when you can be relaxed, you are a better creative. You're a better, I don't want to say you're a better person, but you show up as a better version of yourself. How's that? That's more of what I meant. So that was this weekend for me. And there's a lot of pressure at the beginning of the season to kind of set the tone and set the pace for the rest of the season. And with this being our busiest season ever by far, there also feels a little bit of that pressure to set a good pace. And I do feel like we really accomplished that. So I'm excited. I'll keep you all posted on how it feels as we kind of continue to pace our way and move our way through this crazy season we have ahead of us. So let's briefly switch to talking about astrology and what is happening with our astro check-in this week. So right now we had our new moon last week and our full moon is next week. So we are right in between. We're at a place called the first quarter moon. So if you look up in the sky, you're going to see a quarter of a moon. It's growing, it's getting brighter. We're building up towards that full light, the light filled with sky, the light filled with sky, opposite, the sky filled with light. And this is one of those times like in astrology, I've mentioned this before, that anytime there forms a square, there can be a little bit of a tension or a challenge. And so sometimes when you have this first quarter moon phase or the third quarter moon phase, you can feel a little bit of crises starting to happen, a little bit of problem solving needing to take place. And so that's something just to monitor while you really consider the intentions that you set last week. What are you working towards? What are you building towards? And then how are you readjusting to things that are obstacles? And what are those first obstacles? What information do those obstacles have for you in terms of how you are pacing yourself, how your projection or your trajectory is? I think that's something always worth considering at any part of the process. Sometimes it's worse than others, right? Like for me right now, I am getting ready to redo our website. And so we've been working with a designer on it. And so we had our first meeting. It went great. And then we have our second meeting and it's still all good. But then there's a lot more stuff now. It's like, okay, these are the things I need to change. These are the things I need to go back and revise. These are the things that I'm going to have to go through and clean up, where, you have to start actually taking action on the intentions, right? Like nothing is just like you think it and then it just appears. Well, I shouldn't say nothing, but usually you don't just think it and then it appears. Usually you think it, and as you bring it to life, there's work that has to be done. And sometimes that work is super fun, especially if you choose for it to be. Sometimes that work is just not fun no matter what you choose, right? So something to consider here for sure. And then this weekend, so on the 20th, I guess that's on Thursday? That is when our sun will be switching signs. So it'll be moving from Taurus, where it's been since April 19th, to Gemini. So lots of planets already starting to kind of be in Gemini. Mercury's in Gemini. Venus is in Gemini right now. And Gemini is this energy of vitality, of changeability, of communication, of variability. It is very bubbly and social and creative and intelligent and loves to talk and read and get information and kind of just be bubbly, be on the surface. You can think of Gemini energy as like a spring garden party, or it's kind of like that vibe where you're not just diving deep into one conversation, but you're talking about many subjects. That's definitely a little bit of that Gemini vibe. So something you might want to be looking forward to and actually thinking of how that energy might support you over this next month ahead. What are you excited about that you can let this air sign of Gemini kind of help support you in? Are you needing to be a little bit more social? Are you wanting to be curious about new things? Do you need to work on your communication? Are there things that you want to say or journal about or write or create or talk about? All of those things are going to be a little bit more in the vibration once we move from Sun in Taurus into Sun in Gemini. So, all right, you guys, well, that is it for our Astro Check-in. Let's take a quick break and we'll be right back. So yesterday I went for a walk with one of my very best friends and her son. They're pretty much like family to me. And so we showed up to the park, and he's 8, so he gets out of the vehicle, and he is carrying a sword and a shield, like a wooden sword and shield, something you'd get from like the Renaissance Festival or something. And I'm like, okay, cool. We're going to be bringing this to the park. We're going to bring this on our walk. That sounds great. And then he hops up onto the back of the truck, and he proceeds to try to take out this stick that has to be like 6 feet long. And I asked him, like, hey, what are you doing? Like, what's your plan? He's like, well, I want to bring this stick with me. I'm like, okay. So we get ready to go, and his mom and I look at each other, and we're like, I'm holding the stick at this point, and she's like, you probably need to decide, like, do you want to bring your sword with you, or do you want to bring your stick with you? And of course, his reaction is, I want to bring both, right? Like, you're 8, you had envisioned things going a certain way, you want to bring both. And, we kind of proceeded to, share with him, like, hey, what's going to happen is that, like, you're not going to want to carry both. And so we're going to end up carrying one. And that's not really fair, because it's not our toy. So go ahead and think about it for a second. Which one do you want to decide? Do you want to bring your sword, or do you want to bring the stick? And so he kind of just starts to shut down a little bit, and he gets kind of sad. And at first it's very, very much just like a normal kid trying to show how sad he would be to try to get his way, right? Like, I'm so sad, I really want you to let me pick the stick too. And so we're like, all right, we'll put the stick here, and we'll come back for it later. So I put the stick back in the back of the truck, and we start walking, and he doesn't come with us because now he is upset. Now the decision was made for him, and he is very sad. And I think at first it started, just like I said, navigating that whole thing of like, well, this isn't what I wanted. And for a lot of us, we learn this when we're young. We learn, to what extent can I throw a fit that then I will get my way? And I could tell that he was in this area at the very beginning of this. So, my thought is, and I'm not a parent yet, so I'm sure plenty of you who are parents will know this very well, and you'll probably know it a lot better than I do. So I fully admit that I am in, like, ant territory here. Like, I don't know what I'm talking about totally, but I, have worked with kids a lot, and I was a kid once, so I feel like I understand parts of this. But so as we kind of start walking, and I kind of think, like, let's not make this a big deal. Let's just give him a chance to move on. We start trying to catch up. I haven't seen each other in a really long time, and like actually been able to connect. So we're trying to talk, but we're also painfully aware that like he's falling further and further behind, and super, super sad. He's got the slow walk going. He's got the shrugged shoulders. His head is down. His lip is out. I mean, it is really sad. So we're like, come on, bud, like, let's go. And then it gets to the point where he finally does catch up, and you can tell he's starting to get more and more upset. And we're like, okay, hey, why don't you tell us, like, what's wrong? Like, what are you so upset about right now? And then it's, I don't want to talk about it. And some tears, just like little tears. And it's like, well, if we can't talk about it, then we don't know how to problem solve, right? So I don't want to talk about it. I'm like, okay, no problem. You can be upset as you need. You don't have to talk about anything. You could just be in your feelings, but do walk with us. Okay. Make sure you're with us, because we don't want to lose anybody. So he's kind of walking with us, but he's got, that lip is going even further out now, and he's getting more and more upset as we walk on, and we're not talking about it. And you can tell it's building for him. He's really upset. Now he's starting to cry. And so I bend down, and I'm like looking at him, I'm like, what? Go ahead and it's time for us to talk about it. Like, why are you so sad? Are you upset because you couldn't bring the stick too? And he's like, I just feel like and he's crying through this, I feel like I should have picked the stick. And I'm like, wow, I can tell that you are in a lot of pain right now with your decision making. I can tell that you are really struggling with this decision. And he starts crying more and he's like, I am. I didn't know I was going to have to choose. And it kind of leads us to this conversation around making decisions. And I told him, I was like, in this situation, there are no right or wrong decisions. There's just a decision. So you could have picked the stick or you could have picked the sword. But like, let's really talk through this, right? Like, if you pick anything to come with you, the goal is to have fun with that, right? And now you're not having fun. So would you have had more fun if you would have picked the stick? And he, basically said no, because I think he maybe at this point starts thinking like the right decision was the sword, but what I really want is the stick. So we ask him like, okay, it is your choice. Do you want to turn around right now and change your mind? We can go back and get the stick instead. And he's like, no, it's fine. It's fine. I'll just stick with the sword. But you can tell that that's not what he really wants. And then he's kind of like, well, we gave him 60 seconds to sit and feel and think about things and make the decision. And so he chose nothing. And so we were like, all right, let's go back and drop off the sword then too. Let's bring it all back. So we start walking back and he's a little bit better, but he's not super better. You can tell he's just still really in his feels about all of this. And we end up back at the cars and it's better because it starts to rain and they end up having to go anyway. So we did have a little bit of follow-up conversation just about, decision making and how decision making is tricky. And part of the reason that we had so much of a conversation about this is because this kind of struggle with decision making is a everyday thing for this kid. My best friend and I talk about this all the time. We talk about how it could be something as simple as like, should I stay in the car playing on the iPad or should I go into the grocery store with my mom? It literally could be anything. When you're presented with options, it's debilitating for him. And I think there are so many reasons for that, especially when you're a kid. But I think that probably so many of you can relate to this too, that some of us, we really do get paralyzed with the idea of like, what if I make the wrong decision? And it's something that I feel like I've shared in a different podcast episode about how you really have to kind of let yourself work through that. And one thing that I say is of what I told him earlier. In most situations, there's not a right or wrong decision. There's just making a decision. And that is something that has helped me quite a bit. But it doesn't cure it completely, because decision making is really hard. And for people who struggle with decision making, that can look a lot like obsessive thinking. Like, should I have said something different to so-and-so? Does that person think I'm socially awkward now? Like, what if I would have said this? Or how did I say this? Like, that is obsessive thinking, where you're just obsessing over it over and over and over again. The other thing that can happen is like replaying it over and over again in your head. That's part of the similar thing. But also, I think a big part of it is feeling as though if you make a certain decision that you are losing control, right? So there's a huge aspect of fear that are connected here, like anxiety, fear, loss of control. All of those things are interconnected. And when you have been through a lot of things in your life, whether you have learned whatever kind of code in your own brain over what is a good decision and what is a bad decision. And some of these things have been programmed wrong because of bad responses that others have had that were not actually appropriate for the situation. Or sometimes it's just the pressure that you put on yourself because you have such high expectations. And that's something that I can really relate to. I mean, I can relate to both of them actually, but I think for me, a lot of the decision-making problems that I face have to do with the amount of pressure that I put on myself to do things right the first time, to be perfect, to have thought everything through. And some of that is stuff, definitely from my childhood, just feeling like I had to make the right decision for everyone, or I had to assess the situation and make the right decisions. Some of that too is just being an over-functioner. I'm actually listening to this book right now called Fear and Other Uninvited Guests by Harriet Lerner. It's been wonderful so far. But she was talking about how under-functioning and over-functioning are both byproducts of anxiety. And you can be both in different situations. Oh, you guys, can you hear the thunder rolling in? You might hear a little bit of thunder there in the background. But it made me feel this permission of like, okay, I am an over-functioner in a lot of situations. I definitely like to, or I can get into that superiority complex where I'm like, my way is the best way. I've thought through this the most. And it's from fear, from being scared of how things will turn out, or feeling as though I won't be able to forgive myself if I let somebody else make the decision and it was the wrong one. I would, I guess, rather live with it if I made that decision, right? And that's being a control freak. And I'm trying to kind of wrestle with this a little bit right now myself. Like I said, in my job, I have to make decisions all the time. And what I really wanted to tell my little 8-year-old friend is like, as you grow up, like that's all life is making decisions. And in ways that we don't even fully recognize. Like for him, he decided to continue to be sad about the loss of the stick instead of choose to be happy with being able to go on a walk or having the sword or hanging out at the park, right? And that was definitely probably not a conscious decision for him, not when you're that age by any means, but it is kind of a choice. And it's a choice for all of us of how we're going to deal with whatever happens in our lives, right? I guess that's the thing that I'm kind of trying to tie this all back to is you're going to have to make decisions. Decisions that are uncomfortable, decisions you never wanted to make, decisions that are stressful, or decisions that are really fun, like where you want to vacation next, right? But how you deal with whatever happens, right? Like if you end up, with a flight that gets canceled, are you going to be really upset? Are you going to redirect that to something else? You're going to move on quickly, or you're going to move on slow? If you decided to watch the whole season of The Bachelor last season and you hated how it ended and felt like it was a huge waste of your time, are you going to keep beating yourself up for that decision and refuse to ever watch The Bachelor again, or let it destroy you? Are you going to accept that it was what it was, take what you can from it, and then just move on to the next thing, right? Like, it's a really trivial example. But every day we're going to be making decisions. And it even reminds me of what I was talking about when I was sharing about how much weight I've gained over the past pandemic and like what I'm going to do with it. That is making a decision about what you're going to do next. And we all have to make that decision. If we're unhappy with how something has been in our life, it's up to us to assess the situation and make a new trajectory or an action plan moving forward. And I do think anxiety can really get in the way of that. I've been thinking about this a lot in trying to identify the areas of my life that I am actually an under-functioner. And I actually have a couple, believe it or not. But I've been thinking about that and thinking about the reason why, and it's because there's so much fear there that I have a couple areas, especially around budgets and finance, where I in certain areas where I only let myself go in so deep and then I pull out right away because it is a fearful subject for me. Oh, there's the rain again. Maybe this is like dooming for you, or maybe this is like really calming. I can't, you're gonna have to let me know how that, how that ends up coming across. But just trying to, I guess my only thing is I have no answers. I do know that if you are very scared of decision making, that probably the best thing that you can do is learn how to trust your decision making by accepting whatever you choose. And that is really hard, especially if you are caught up in, as soon as you make the decision, then you're stuck in a cycle of regret. That's definitely a hard one to get out of, that I'm not quite sure how to tackle, other than making a commitment to yourself that you're going to be okay with whatever you choose, or that you are willing to do whatever it takes to see if you are able to go back and change your mind if you are absolutely sure that that's what you want. Because in real life, you are allowed to do that a lot of the time. You are allowed to, return the black stone that you thought you wanted, that you get home and it doesn't fit, or you realize that you don't really like it, right? You are allowed to buy a different bedspread when you had just picked out all of the decor for your room and then you decide you don't like it. You are allowed to change your mind. And there are certain times that you can't, right? Especially around experiences. If you decide not to buy the concert ticket and they sell out, well, you're going to have to live with that decision. But you can always try, right? You can always, and the biggest thing is that you can always learn from how you felt about your decision making. Because if there's one thing that like regret can really teach you, it's what you would do differently in the future. And that is probably the biggest thing that we can really allow ourselves to sit within and let it influence us and how we want to move through the world and through our lives and through our decision making. So that is really all I have for us today, everyone. I will say that if you haven't had a chance to check out the new products that are newly up on the website, this weekend I posted the full moon meditation as well as a yoga class that is an invitation to find balance, and it's a gentle class. So if you are not on the Patreon, but you still want to try some of my meditations or take a yoga class with me, please check those out on my website. You can find them at abitfromwithin.com. Or if you love yoga and you love guided meditations and you want all of it, then definitely check out our Patreon page and become a fan and help support all of this work that I am trying to do out there. I hope that you continue to take wonderful care of yourself. Oh, we got to do our card drawing, and then we will officially close up here. So you guys know that I'm loving the Super Attractor deck right now. So that is where I'm going to draw from today. While the sound of the thunder rolls on in the background, it's actually really beautiful outside, you guys. And the sky is super gray, and the reflections of all of the houses are along the pavement. It's beautiful. So this card says, the universe powerfully responds the instant I realign with love. I love that, because a lot of people say that the opposite of fear is love. And it kind of reminds me of this whole idea of decision making. The universe will powerfully respond the instant that I realign with love. I think we've all experienced that, right? It's like that part of the decision making that I am talking about with choosing to, move forward and just be happy with what you have, or happy with the decision you made. That is actually just realigning yourself with the decision that was made, accepting it, moving forward with it. And I do think that the universe conspires in really powerful ways when we are in alignment. And in addition, when we are stuck in fear or regret and obsessive thinking and especially fear, then maybe we don't make we're not allowing for the universe to fully support us in the ways that it's capable when we're in that space. So you can take that however you will, but think about that and how it integrates into your own life, or how it might connect and affect you. All right, everyone, until next time, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for sitting through this quite loud thunderstorm with me. I appreciate you, and I can't wait to talk to you next week.